If it's Tuesday, President Biden issues an urgent call to defend democracy at home and abroad as he pushes world leaders to stand up to Putin and seems to retool his re-election pitch. Plus, a House divided. Talks to avert a government shutdown hit a new roadblock as House Speaker McCarthy is forced to call off a key vote amid quarreling in his conference and with his speakership on the line. And politics and picket lines. Thousands more auto workers could soon go on strike as White House officials stay on the sidelines and former President Trump plans an address to union workers in Detroit instead of attending the next Republican presidential debate. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Garrett Hake reporting in Washington as President Biden tries to frame his presidency and his re-election campaign around the battle for democracy at home and abroad. With the war in Ukraine now in its second year, President Biden addressed world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, trying to rally UN members to stand up to what he called Russia's naked aggression in Ukraine, as he urged nations to meet the moment and defend democracy in what he called an inflection point in world history.
We will defend democracy, our best tool to meet the challenges we face around the world. And we're working to show how democracy can deliver in ways that matter to people's lives. Russia's price for peace is Ukraine's capitulation, Ukraine's territory, and Ukraine's children. Russia believes that the world will grow weary and allow it to brutalize Ukraine without consequence. But I ask you this, if we abandon the core principles of the United States to appease an aggressor, can any member state in this body feel confident that they are protected? If we allow Ukraine to be carved up, is the independence of any nation secure? I'd respectfully suggest the answer is no.
President Zelensky also addressed the United Nations this year, delivering his remarks in person.
Weaponization must be restrained. War crimes must be punished. Deported people must come back home. And the occupier must return to their own land. We must be united to make it, and we'll do it. Slava Ukraini.
Zelensky will bring that impassioned plea for assistance to Washington later this week when he heads to the Capitol, the White House, and to the Pentagon. It comes as public support for additional aid to Ukraine is fading, particularly among Republicans. While Biden tries to make his pitch for democracy around the world, his democracy here at home faces serious challenges of its own, including a government shutdown in 11 days and an impeachment hearing getting underway right before that. But according to the president, the biggest threat to U.S. democracy is his likely 2024 campaign rival, Donald Trump. Here's what Biden told donors yesterday ahead of today's remarks. Quote, in 2024, democracy is on the ballot once again. And let there be no question, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans are determined to destroy American democracy, and I will always defend, protect, and fight for our democracy. That's why I'm running. That message from the president is a return to the messaging from his 2020 presidential campaign and a sharp turn away from his Bidenomics pitch to voters that's dominated his messaging over the past few months, but has also largely failed to boost the president's flagging approval rating and poll numbers. Joining me now is Mike Memoli outside the United Nations, and Richard Engel is with us from Ukraine. And Mike, I'll start with you. As the president makes this pitch for democracy, how was his message received in the room? What were world leaders doing? How were they reacting?
Well, Garrett, there was parts of this long speech from the president today that were, very micro, intended literally for the people in the room. We're talking about career diplomats, things like reforming the UN Charter, expanding the Security Council, new financing for the World Bank. That was an audience that the president was targeting with some of those very specific proposals. There was the broader audience, of course, as we've been covering this president over the last 2.5 years, his foreign policy outlook, that this is a battle between democracies like the U.S. and autocracies like China and Russia. This year in particular, we've seen that battle sort of for the global South, developing countries like in Africa and Southeast Asia. The president beginning his speech by talking about Vietnam. That was very conspicuous. The only applause line, though, and the heart of really the president's message, of course, was about Ukraine. And that really is something that the president is hoping he can sustain. It was not as big a part of his speech this year compared to what we saw last year. He acknowledged in his remarks today that Russia is counting on the world, growing weary of this struggle. But the president, nonetheless, ending with that refrain, talking about the need to continue to support Ukraine, because if not, then where is it going to move on to next? And that was a point that President Zelensky, who the White House acknowledges is himself the more than the president, effective messenger for this cause, made himself. He said Russia has expanded its horizons every decade. Look at Georgia, look at Belarus, as he said, that is now being swallowed up. He says you have to continue to support Ukraine now because of what could come next. And that's the message that these two men are hoping will continue to resonate, even as support, as you rightly note, is starting to really start to wane.
And Mike, on the domestic front, the president seems to be shifting a little bit away from his Bidenomics message. He's changing things up, sort of leaning back into the defense of democracy message that we saw in 2020 and the midterms. Talk me through the White House strategy on this and how they view that change.
Well, Garrett, there are, as I often invoke the number, 413 days until Election Day, and I promise you we haven't heard the last of Bidenomics. It will come back. This is obviously a foreign policy heavy part of the calendar, the G20 just last week, the trip to Vietnam, and of course the UN this week. But it is really notable, Garrett. This is probably the first time in 2 decades that we are seeing at least one of the campaigns put foreign policy to the front of the political discussion in the way the Biden campaign is now, as George W. Bush did 20 years ago. Look at the campaign ad that the president launched last week talking about his trip to Ukraine. Look at the president's blunt remarks that you quoted from last night. Look ahead to what he's going to be doing in a battleground state next week in Arizona, giving a speech about democracy. The president does think that this is an important message that will resonate, but you're also going to continue to see him toggle it with that domestic economic message. In October, we will see the president, even potentially during a government shutdown, getting back out to key swing states to talk about that split screen, as the White House is calling it right now, between the president's priorities and what we see among the Republicans in Congress, who you spend a lot of time around, Garrett.
That's right. Mike Memoli outside the United Nations for us. Mike, thank you. I want to turn to Richard now in Ukraine. And Richard, as Mike points out, President Zelensky is such an effective messenger for his cause. What was the goal of the speech today, the specific message that he's hoping to convey in this speech and on this trip?
Don't give up on Ukraine, and I think he wanted to convey a sense of urgency. When you're here in Ukraine, people forget about the war outside the country. You can't forget about the war here in Ukraine. There were just air raid sirens in Kharkiv, where I'm standing right now, a few minutes ago, and then they were ringing a few hours before that, and we heard them last night as well. All throughout the east of this country, and really half of this country, you're living in a constant threat. You're living in a constant war zone where power is scarce. The winter is coming here. It's heavily militarized. We were in a frontline town yesterday. It was largely destroyed. There are only 900 people left. They were completely dependent on the mayor. Every day, the mayor has to bring in, hand carry in supplies on one road in or out. And they're very worried about this nuclear power plant. President Zelensky was talking about it today, how Russia's weaponizing nuclear power. Mm-hmm. It's because Russia is occupying a nuclear power plant in this country, and there's fighting around it. And not just Ukrainian officials, but many international experts worry that it's a ticking time bomb, that one day this nuclear facility could blow up and contaminate large parts of this country and potentially spread around the world. So there is a serious degree of urgency that I think he's trying to deliver, that frontline communities are getting devastated. Ukraine is sending its troops into battle. It is having to improvise on the battlefield, converting drones and using them to offset where it doesn't have enough artillery. So I think he really wanted to say, this is serious. We're living this every day. Don't give up on us because we haven't given up on ourselves.
Well, and to me, it seems like not so much even a question of giving up, but I hear it all the time on Capitol Hill, especially from Republicans, almost this idea of Ukraine war fatigue. What's your sense of how widespread that is globally among Ukraine's other allies, and how much of an uphill climb do you think he then faces, not just in Washington, but with all of the countries that have been aiding Ukraine in this war?
It's the numbers. Like I said, here in Ukraine, they're not tired. They're tired physically, but
sure,
they're not anywhere near giving up. But when you go across Europe and what you're hearing in the United States, it's inflation. People are concerned about the rising costs. They're feeling that they don't have enough money, even though the economic numbers seem to be changing. But for the last several months, we've been going through quite an uncertain economic time, and people are listening to these announcements coming from the White House or coming from the British government or the French government, talking about billions of dollars or billions of euros. And they're wondering, what are they getting in return? And we're talking large numbers. The White House is seeking another $20 billion. The U.S. has already spent $64 billion on this. So the numbers are big. But going back to what Ukrainians would say, they would say, relatively speaking, it's cheap.
Sure.
To be totally cynical, that if the United States is trying to, among other things, defend democracy and blunt one of its rivals that is trying to spread tyranny, then $20 billion is cheap. That when are you going to get a better circumstance than this, where you have a willing ally that is doing all the fighting for you and is still anxious to keep going, otherwise they lose their country.
All right, Richard Engelforce in Kharkiv tonight. Richard, appreciate your reporting. Please stay safe out there. And joining me now is Indiana Republican Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. She's the first Ukrainian-born member of Congress. And Congresswoman, you made some comments this morning suggesting that you believe that the president is playing politics with Ukraine aid, and that some of your Republican colleagues are essentially buying into Russian propaganda. So let me ask you this today, going forward, what should Congress, what should the United States be doing now that we aren't when it comes to the war?
Listen, thank you for asking that question. I've been very consistent, and I said, you know, you have to have a strategy. If you want to win, you need to back up with your tactics and actions, not to have a strategy not to lose, because you actually will not win, and if you're not planning to win, but you might lose if you try not to lose. And unfortunately, President been very afraid, been very political, and he, been slow walking assistance to Ukraine. And it's a huge fight, and Putin only understands the language of power and weapons. He doesn't care about all of the tweets and talks. And this is a huge problem now, because this war will continue now for much longer. And, the problem is, if our president is not communicated to Congress, in fact, I haven't seen his people forever. He not communicated what's happening there. He's not updating us. It means that he's not communicating to the American people what is in our national interest and why this is important for us to win against Russia and China, not to give them Europe as we already gave them Africa and South America. But that is job of a president, to get American people on board and deal with domestic issues too, not playing politics and go do a lot of grandstanding, try to put some of these bills just on pure Democrat bills on purpose. He knew that some of these large bills, if you have 98% of things that Republicans don't disagree, people are not going to be voting for it, but he used it as a propaganda tool. And now what's happening, Putin been destabilizing a lot of conservatives here and selling them propaganda, and don't underestimate Russia with their propaganda machine.
So are you making that argument behind the scenes with your Republican colleagues? I mean, right now, House Republicans are basically the largest group in bulk who are less supportive of Ukraine aid. Zelensky's going to be meeting with the Speaker, among others, this week. I mean, what do you hope? What argument do you hope he makes, and what argument are you making to your Republican colleagues to stay the course here, or to speed up the course, if that's what you think is appropriate?
Well, unfortunately, now they got themselves in a very bad situation. When I made that argument over a year ago, and I said, we need to be accountable to the American people. We need to have better oversight. We need to better job to make sure that that aid is gets faster and know where it's going and show how it benefits the American people. Well, I was attacked by both parties that demanding accountability is somehow being pro-Russian and pro-Putin. I was dragged through mud, which is fine. I'm willing to stand up. Unfortunately, a lot of these issues we haven't dealt. Now, there is a much tougher situation. And unfortunately, lack of leadership on this issue created now opportunities for Russia to take advantage of our base, and they're good on, doing propaganda. Look at what's happened in Russia. They're like machines, like zombies dying there, for invading other country and truly believe in that. They're good at propaganda. Don't underestimate on their hybrid wars. And I think we need to be much better. And what they're doing around the world, it's not just in Ukraine, what they're doing in Africa and how many people are dying and suffering in places like Syria. It's unfortunate. And I think it takes some leadership, strong leadership.
Let's talk a little bit about strong leadership, because you were very critical of the speaker this week. You called him weak during this funding process. He's just pulled the CR procedural vote from the floor. This defense vote just failed on the floor. What do you want to see from Speaker McCarthy that he's not been doing?
Well, listen, we got into these issues. We have a serious fiscal catastrophe looming. We didn't get here overnight. We will not get out of here overnight. But if we abandon our duties, Congress, and not doing our job and doing politicking, we will never get out until it's going to hurt the American people significantly.
Isn't shutting down the government the peak of abandoning that job?
Listen, but the challenge is we should have not been in a position now where we couldn't even pass appropriations bills out of the committee. We're increasing the amount of unauthorized spending. We knew, like, September 30th didn't change on the calendar. We knew about it. I talked to him about this issue starting last November. We had this discussion. I said, we need to have a plan. We need to have to deal with that ceiling increase. We need to have a plan that is meaningful to move the needle. And he didn't want to deal with this issue. Now we get into a position like people try to do things under pressure. Well, that's not the way to govern. So I think it is a problem, because fiscal issue, which is number one issue that Congress should be dealing with, is being abandoned. So what are we doing here?
So what now? I mean, if not Kevin McCarthy, is there someone in your conference who you think would be a better leader for this party right now?
Listen, I think actually the Speaker of the House doesn't even be a member of Congress. A lot of people don't realize it. I think a lot of people learn it. I'm sure with country over 200 million people, we have choices, right? But ultimately, I mean, Kevin is not a symptom of the system. And I think we have to stand up as Republicans and put pressure and have this conversation. But ultimately, leaders have to hold accountability, hold them accountable too. And unfortunately, he didn't deliver on a lot of major issues. Now we're again in the crisis mode.
So what do you say to the voters who put Republicans in power? You guys then voted for McCarthy as your speaker, and you're staring down the barrel of this potential shutdown here that you've just suggested is because you guys weren't doing your jobs. What do you say to people who look at all that and say, this is not a party that can govern?
Well, listen, other party failed us, and we can make a difference and show the American people we can lead, or will be another failure. And I know that Senate is corrupt and is not controlled by Republicans, but Republicans and Democrats are not willing to govern this country. And the House has an opportunity under my leadership to make a difference. Otherwise we're all failing.
Can I ask, how is the Senate corrupt?
Well, because the Senate is so afraid. I'll tell you how corrupt. Why do we not have any, they don't want to put any serious cuts to fraud, even fraud in this appropriations, because their number 1, 2, and 3 lobbies, big pharma, big hospitals, and big insurance that destroying Medicare. We're talking billions of dollars. 5 items that Obama and Trump agreed on, 1.8 trillion. I stand it. This is going to make a difference. Bipartisan support. It will help with saving Medicare for seniors. Well, but it will have to shake up status quo here. They're afraid because they put this money in super PACs and they collect enormous amount of money and do nothing in the Senate. What are they moving? How they determine long-term policies for this country? They're supposed to do it. It's much harder for the House. So I told them the House can have to push to them and win this for the people.
I can assure you it's harder definitely to pass things in the Senate when you need 60 than a majority in the House, usually. But I want to ask you one other question on another topic before I have to let you go, Congresswoman. The other big story in the House right now is impeachment. And back in 2021, when you first started in the House, you said the following of the push to impeach Donald Trump over his actions on the 6th. You said, Congress should stop playing divisive politics and start working on delivering good policies for the American people. You've got an impeachment hearing coming up just a couple days before the government's supposed to shut down. Do you feel the same way now?
I truly agree with that, but we have to go through serious investigations before we move anything forward. That's, I think, majority members on Judiciary Committee actually supporting to have a proper processes, including impeachment inquiry, before we decide. Because to go into proceedings, it's a serious business. So, and I think most people underestimate my Republican colleagues on Judiciary Committee. Most of them are constitutionalists. Listen, I voted some issues, we made some tough votes because I truly believe my oath into Constitution. We're actually not a pure democracy. We're the rule of law, and we're a constitutional republic. So I'm willing to take tough votes, and we have to have proper investigations before we move with anything forward. So I think it's a proper step. Where Speaker Pelosi was just plain politics, and we know with a stroke of the pen decide to go through impeachment of a sitting president. This is totally ridiculous and irresponsible and reckless.
Congresswoman, really quick then, do you believe that there should be a vote right now to authorize this impeachment inquiry? You said you're willing to take a tough vote.
Listen, I think we should have a vote. I don't think there should be an objection because inquiry is a proper process. It's actually a proper procedural step that the House to do. And I think that vote probably should be taken. People shouldn't be afraid to take the vote because that is a proper thing to do.
I'm glad to get you on the record on that. Congresswoman Spartz, thank you for spanning the globe with us in this segment. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
And coming up, more on this Capitol chaos. We are live on the Hill where tempers are flaring right now after a group of House conservatives just blocked an effort to advance the defense spending bill. This was a procedural vote. Plus, meet the pushback. Former President Trump is facing new criticism from a Republican primary rival after comments he made on the issue of abortion during his exclusive interview with Kristen Welker. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We're following some developing news right now in the House. It comes after Arkansas Republican Congressman Steve Womack told me yesterday that the situation inside the House Republican Conference was, and I quote, an unmitigated disaster. Well, things appear to have gotten worse today. This morning, Speaker McCarthy was forced to pull a procedural vote on the short-term spending deal backed by leadership as they struggle to sway holdouts inside the conference. After huddling with members this morning, the Speaker said discussions were still ongoing.
And you know what? Getting there is never easy, but we're willing to listen to all voices, something much different. We're willing to build up from the bottom up. And the one thing that we found is members got together over the weekend. They came up with solutions. We aired the solutions right here. I thought we had a very good discussion, and we'll continue that discussion today with those that have some more questions. America's too great to give up just because you have a tough discussion.
And while the Speaker tries to put on a happy face here, the sniping between warring factions inside his conference is intensifying, and a government shutdown is looking all the more likely at month's end. Here's just a bit of that sniping between Florida Congressman Byron Donalds, who helped cut the imperiled deal on spending, and Matt Gaetz, who's one of several members trying to kill it.
I'm doing everything I can to assemble a coalition to defeat the Donald CR. I believe that it is really kind of frivolous in the cuts because they only occur for 30 days.
I would challenge my colleague from Florida to create a coalition that tries to actually get a victory for the American people. If he wants to have a personal thing with me going back and forth, he's entitled to, but I don't care about that foolishness. I want to win.
We can't blame Joe Biden and the Democrats for why the Republican-controlled House of Representatives hasn't passed single-subject spending bills. That's our fault. So we have to deal with that. We will likely have to endure some degree of a shutdown.
Adding insult to insult, in the past few minutes, Republicans didn't even have the votes to advance what, for them, is a non-controversial bill to fund the military. That vote was torpedoed by some of the very same holdouts on government funding. Moments ago, some Republicans from more moderate districts voiced their displeasure on the steps of the Capitol. Listen to this.
What we just witnessed was a conservative Republican Party, frankly, look and behave like the minority instead of the majority. What we just saw were 5 individuals vote against a rule to bring to the floor for a vote the most conservative DOD bill in modern history.
Joining me now with the latest on all this from Capitol Hill is my colleague Ryan Nobles. Ryan, where are we right now in the Republican conference? Did we move any closer to keeping the lights on today, or just take more hops and leaps backwards?
Well, I think Congressman Womack's description to you yesterday was pretty apt and continues. It remains an unmitigated disaster, I think, by any measure. But I think maybe the difference between what we saw yesterday and what we're seeing today is this new kind of public frustration from the moderates in the caucus. You know, behind the scenes, we know the moderates have quite a bit of influence with the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. But publicly, it seems as though it's the conservatives that run the day, because they're the ones that get in the way of this progress and the deals that the Speaker and his leadership team make behind closed doors. Listen to how the Speaker himself seems to starting to get even more frustrated with this group of breakaway conservatives.
I go ask the following backwards, please. Why are they voting against being? Think about what they're voting against. They're voting against even bringing the bill up to have a discussion about it, to vote on it. If you're opposed to the bill, vote against the bill at the end. You've got more than 170 amendments. You could change it if you don't like it. But the idea that you vote against a rule to even bring it up, doesn't make sense to me.
What about the CR?
Especially when you're talking about defense.
How bad is the CR at this point in terms of getting to the floor?
You'd have to ask the whip about that, but I think that we're making progress.
And it's important for our viewers to understand this, Garrett, that this is a change from McCarthy. You know, it's basically since he took the Speaker's gavel, he's allowed the Freedom Caucus to continue to poke him in the eye, and he just kind of accepts it and says this is just part of the process. This is what happens in a family. We'll figure it out at the end of the day. But we just witnessed two different groups of Republican members come to the House steps and really go after this conservative faction. There is a level of frustration that we haven't seen before. In the past, they've always directed it at Democrats. Now the fighting is happening within their own conference, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out going forward.
When I interviewed Dusty Johnson yesterday, he made that point that, you know, the 210 could start really throwing their weight around against the 8 that you would need to get to a minority, whatever it is, the 210 versus the 10, and he thought that would change. I was struck by something that Mike Garcia just told you, the idea that these Republicans are still running things like they are in the minority. Do you think that's a factor here at all? You've got a whole bunch of folks who've never been in a House majority before, a lot of new members in this conference with a new speaker, and they just functionally, and I don't mean this disparagingly, don't know how to do this when they're responsible for carrying votes on the basic stuff that keeps the government functioning.
Listen, Garrett, you and I have done this a long time, and we know that there's a big difference between being in the minority and being in the majority. And the biggest thing, the biggest advantage, I should say, that you have in being in the minority is that you can be as pure as you want on any particular topic, because you're never forced to get anything over the finish line. And what we see with these Freedom Caucus members in particular is that they've taken this stance of purity that's now put them in a box where they claim they're going to get all this, you know, accomplished for the American people. But at the end of the day, it's not going to pass the Senate, and it's not going to be signed by the president into law. And so you've got to figure out some way forward. And what we saw with these two different groups of moderates, a group of veterans and then a group of moderates that were in districts that were won by President Biden, was this sense that they're getting sick and tired of it. And the only option they have here, and they kind of talked about it in broad strokes about the different leverage points that they have with these members of the majority that aren't acting like it. One of the big options they have is to partner with a small group of moderate Democrats to get things moving. And this group, they were specifically asked about that. We asked about a discharge petition. We asked about other things, and they said everything is on the table, Garrett.
Yeah, look, the mechanism is still a mystery, but a bipartisan agreement is probably how we get out of this. But how and when we get there is a whole other set of questions. Ryan Nobles, thank you for your reporting. And up next, auto workers are warning of additional strikes in the coming days as President Biden faces growing pressure to keep union members in his corner, while former President Trump is planning a rally in Detroit. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Striking auto workers have set a new deadline for negotiations with the big three automakers, promising additional strikes if, quote, serious progress isn't made by noon Friday. This comes as the White House now says it will not be sending a team to Detroit this week to help the UAW and automakers reach an agreement. This despite earlier plans to send White House advisor Gene Sperling and acting Labor Secretary Julie Su to participate in strike talks, quote, early in the week. Well, meanwhile, the strike is getting increased attention on the campaign trail. Sources tell NBC News that former president and current Republican frontrunner Donald Trump plans to deliver a primetime address to union workers in Detroit next Wednesday. Just so happens to be at the same time the GOP field takes the stage in California for the second Republican primary debate without him. We should note that the UAW says neither Trump nor his team have reached out to them directly. The former president criticized UAW leadership during his interview with our own Kristen Welker, but he refrained from criticizing union members. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump's 2024 rival Tim Scott is now suggesting striking workers should be fired. Listen to this.
Ronald Reagan gave us a great example when federal employees decided they were going to strike. He said, you strike, you're fired. Simple concept to me. To the extent that we could use that once again, absolutely. They want more money, working fewer hours. They want more benefits, working fewer days. In America, also known as America, that doesn't make sense.
NBC News correspondent Shaq Brewster is on the ground as UAW workers are striking in Toledo, Ohio. And Shaq, these UAW workers announced this new deadline for negotiations. What's the union threatening here in terms of this sort of staggered strike if these companies don't meet the deadline?
Well, Garrett, you can see an expanded strike. Right now, you have about 13,000 union workers on strike of a 140,000 union membership. So about 3 plants of well over 20. So they're saying that they could target additional plants in the coming days, or Friday at noon if they don't see progress. What that progress looks like or how much progress that could be, that remains to be seen. But the union membership and union leadership is being very clear that this strike could expand very quickly if they're not seeing enough progress, Garrett.
Shaq, what's your sense of the Trump part of this, with him going to Detroit? Obviously, you're in Ohio, but what do we expect from that visit, and how do you think it'll play with union members and union leadership with him injecting himself into their negotiations in this way?
Yeah, Garrett, it's a very interesting dynamic because both with dealing with the Biden administration and former President Trump, you've heard the union leadership kind of say, thank you, but we got it. We can handle our own negotiations. We're the one at the table. You even saw this statement from Sean Fain, we'll put it up, pushing back against the existence of Donald Trump, at least in Detroit, talking to union workers. You see him saying that every fiber in the union being is poured into fighting the billionaire class and an economy that enriches people like Donald Trump. Again, Sean Fain and UAW saying that they haven't gotten any comment from or that former President Trump hasn't reached out to the UAW at all. But Garrett, I want to play a piece of sound, a piece of a conversation I had with the union member when I asked her about this potential visit from former President Trump. Listen to what she said, not just about Trump, but also about President Biden.
It would be nice if they were actually out here doing it for real instead of just for votes.
Who are you thinking about when you say that?
Trump.
You think he's just doing this for the campaign?
He didn't support us before, back when he was president. And neither did Biden. Biden's the one with electrification and basically forcing the big three to go electrified. So I think it's just for votes.
The push for electric vehicles, that makes you critical of the president.
Yes, it does.
That gives you a sense of why Donald Trump feels that there is an opening. There is concern, legitimate concern among union membership that the transition to electric vehicles could mean fewer jobs or at least less job security for them, Garrett.
Yeah, look, that's certainly the space that Donald Trump is trying to exploit here. Shaq Brewster, appreciate your reporting out there. And I'm joined now in the studio by today's panel. Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. He's also an NBC News political analyst and the co-author of The Divider, which is out in paperback today. I got the hardback copy on my nightstand. Also with me is Democratic strategist Amisha Cross and Republican strategist Brad Todd. So, Peter, I'll start with you. I mean, what do you make of this counter-programming strategy from Donald Trump? To me, it seems less about the primary debate and more about the general election, the way he is trying to go about this next week.
Yeah, he doesn't need to be in a primary debate. He's winning, or in his view, almost already won, in effect, the Republican nomination. Why bother to get down on the stage with these guys who have no chance, in his view, of winning? That's the image he wants to present, at least, and in appealing to the union workers, if not the union leadership, he's trying to peel off people, of course, who will be otherwise more sympathetic to President Biden. So you're right. I think it's a general election strategy in a primary election night.
Brad, how central is that strategy if he wants to crack the blue wall again, to peel off these union members and say, these folks don't represent you, I do?
Well, Republican Party's undergone a realignment in the last 10 years. Donald Trump's a part of it, but he certainly didn't cause it. And that realignment is a working class party of work realignment. That's a thing Republicans have in common. So you're going to consistently see Republicans move toward trade unions. That doesn't include government unions. If you work in air conditioning and sit at a desk and you're in a union, that's not the Republican constituency there. But if you're someone who works in a factory, works with your hands, you saw this on the Keystone Pipeline, and I think this is a repeat on a bigger scale.
Misha, should the White House be worried about this, the possibility that the former president can peel off support from voters who feel like that woman who Shaq talked to, that Biden administration's gone too far on electrification or what have you, and that Trump might appeal to some of these folks?
Absolutely. Historically, Trump and the Republican Party has not been friendly towards unions, be it whether it's teachers unions, auto unions, you name it. They are not union strong in any way. But I do think there's something to be said about the change in tempo. Part of it is because, you know, the road to the election goes through the Midwest. The Midwest is union-centric. So I do think that this is a president or former president who understands that, and he's also trying to at least become a little bit more to the center, but making fun of something that, quite frankly, a lot of people are afraid of, changes in innovation. When we talk about electric vehicles, the same way we talk about AI, there are a lot of people who are afraid that they're going to lose their jobs, and I think that there may be a certain quakes there.
And even if it is a stunt to have Trump go, I think about when he went to East Palestine and then tried to make that same argument that, you know, President Biden is being president for Ukraine and I'm being president for Ohio. Does the White House, should they be participating in some of these stunts on their own, perhaps, to try to counteract this? Or are they taking the high road? Is that the right way to play it?
They're taking the high road, but I would argue they also need to get in the fight, because President Biden has been a union person for a very long time, throughout the entirety of his political career, but also before that. He has been one of the forebearers when it comes to being vocal about unions over time. And I think that this is a time where he needs to be full frontal as well. Do not mistake that historical understanding that all of us around this table have for your average American voter. He needs to be out there.
But Joe Biden's never been willing to pick trade union members over the environmental lobby. He doesn't do that. And so that's why you see him backing off right now. I think what you saw the interviewer, the person Shaq interviewed, that's what the UAW members are going to want to see. Is Joe Biden willing to back off his EV commitment for workers, or is he going to pick environmental liberals?
Well, and Brad, what did you make of the Tim Scott bite we played there, too? Because I feel like that's the much more traditional Republican play on this, is like, screw these guys, you know, we're going to have a hard line on it. That'll play at the Reagan Library. Is that a misreading of where the electorate is now?
I think it is, even of the capitalist side of the Republican Party, because if you think of who are the most strongly skeptical of unions in the Republican Party, they're people who own medium-sized businesses and small businesses, and they're on the same side as the UAW worker is when it comes to electric vehicles.
And Peter, I mean, what do you think? What do you make of this? If you've got Trump's rivals basically talking to a 1980s version, perhaps, of what they think the base wants to hear on one side, and Trump talking to a different side, is that a space the White House can exploit? Or does it mean something in the Republican primary that these two are on? Trump is over here and everybody else is on the other side?
Look, Trump has successfully redrawn the map to some extent. You're right, it didn't start with Trump, obviously, but he had appealed to working-class Democrats in a way that previous Republican candidates really didn't. And the question for Biden is, how can he get back into that? And he's tried. He's gone to Scranton, Pennsylvania, any number of times. He does position himself as Union Joe. The EV thing is a challenge for that. How do you balance that? And if he manages to find a way to settle this strike soon, it probably doesn't have that much of an impact. But if it drags on for a while, it both erodes his support probably among those people, and of course endangers the economy that he needs to be strong going into next year.
Well, I want to get to another topic here really quick, because the other thing that where we're seeing this kind of split between Trump and the base, Trump and the rest of the field, is on abortion, and we've seen some strong reaction from the other Republican candidates to Trump's comments on abortion on this Sunday version of this program over the last couple of days. I want to play some of that now.
President Trump said he would negotiate with the Democrats and walk back away from what I believe where we need to be, which is a 15-week limit on the federal level.
I think all pro-lifers should know that he's preparing to sell you out. And so I don't think that what he's saying would work, and I don't think he would be able to generate a quote, deal that would be acceptable to pro-lifers.
So, Brad, we're a week away from the next Republican debate or thereabouts. Is abortion and unions the ground that Republicans want to be having this conversation?
Well, there are going to be some. And, Donald Trump is not a native conservative. And so his gut reaction on a lot of cultural issues is not where the party is. He usually gets there, but he doesn't often start there. And I think the president was off. The former president was off on that on Sunday. I would be surprised if he doesn't correct a little bit in the next few weeks.
This is a bit of a best-case scenario for Democrats if Republicans are fighting amongst themselves about who can be furthest to the right on abortion?
Absolutely. And I think part of it is because they're also being attentive to the national polling. At the end of the day, we know that the majority of the American public does not support highly restrictive abortion at all. So I think that you see in former President Trump somebody who actually wants to win. And to a point that Peter made earlier, he's pivoted to the general election. He is talking to general election voters. He's not talking to Republican primaries because he feels like he's got that locked up anyway.
But Tim Scott's not talking about anything extreme. He's talking about where the American people mostly are. It's something latent pregnancy, restrictions having latent pregnancy. And so,
but those have already existed. At the end of the day, there are very few pregnancies that end in late-term abortions. Very few. We're talking about less than 3%. And those are emergency medical situations. That has been proven time and time again. He is arguing a mute point to drive up fear.
And who gets to legislate that and how, I think, is at the core of this debate, whether it's a national or a state level or Donald Trump says everybody's going to sit down and talk about it. We're going to come to a negotiated settlement. I'm not sure. I think that's how it's going to go. Peter, Trump's not the only one who's changing his messaging. The Biden campaign has been kind of bouncing back and forth. We talked about this a little earlier in the program, from Bidenomics to now back to the defensive democracy argument. Why do you think we're seeing the pivot now? And do we think this set of messaging from the current president will be more effective than what he's done before in terms of burnishing his own image and bringing down Trump?
I think you'll still see Bidenomics out there. I don't think
they're not going to abandon it, clearly.
Exactly. But so far, after 2-3 months, it hasn't moved the needle, right? And so they're trying to, of course, hit at the issue that will bring people back to him who may be disappointed in him, right? Their view is Trump's votes are at a ceiling. There's only so many people who will vote for him. And the question is, can the Biden will win back the disaffected Democrats and the independents who won't vote for Trump, but might stay home if they don't find Biden appealing enough. And he's trying to remind them that the choice is not, as he likes to say, between him and the Almighty, it's between him and the alternative.
Amisha, would it have been impossible for Biden to touch these sort of threats to democracy arguments during the summer of indictments, right? I mean, Biden tried so hard to stay out of the fray on that. If he's coming out every day and saying Trump's a danger to democracy, and oh, by the way, here's another indictment, that gets really messy, does it not?
It absolutely does. And quite frankly, the American public is tired of hearing about it. So there's this issue of Bidenomics did not settle well with people because student loans are going to start kicking up again in the next few weeks, and people are still having a hard time paying their rent and paying their utilities. On top of that, you also have a situation where many people in America don't feel as though we're spending too much in trying to, in our protection of Ukraine. They don't understand it. It is a very, I would argue, an isolationist posture, but one that is driven by economic woes here in the United States.
All right, that's going to have to be the last word on this for now. Amisha Cross, Brad Todd, Peter Baker, thank you all for coming in. And home at last, how these 5 Americans reacted after touching down on U.S. soil for the first time after years of imprisonment in Iran, and the White House's emotional call with their families. That's after the break. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The 5 Americans released from Iran after being wrongly imprisoned are back on U.S. soil. A plane carrying the 5, along with 2 of their relatives, landed early this morning at Fort Belvoir in Virginia, not far from us here in D.C. The Americans were released as part of a prisoner exchange that also allowed Iran to access $6 billion in oil revenue that had been frozen under U.S. sanctions. 5 Iranians were also released from U.S. custody. Among the Americans now free, Siamak Namazi, a businessman who'd been held in Iran since 2015.
It's amazing, unfreaking believable. We're so grateful to be together after 8 years. It's unbelievable. Almost 8 years to the day. It's unbelievable. We're so grateful. It's just, you feel like it's a dream. The nightmare is finally over.
It's great stuff. Gabe Gutierrez, a White House correspondent, joins us now from Fort Belvoir in Virginia. So, Gabe, what additional details have you learned about this trip back to the U.S. for these folks?
Well, Garrett, as you mentioned, it was a dramatic homecoming, and during this trip, we understand that those 5 prisoners, took part in a meal on the plane, that they were, having lamb and wine, and basically enjoying something that they had not been able to have access to for the last several years. These prisoner exchange happened after years of tense negotiations with the Iranians. And now we're also hearing from senior administration officials that they're taking part in what's known as the PISA program. And that's a program meant to kind of bring back or help these prisoners transition back to normal life here in the U.S. It had previously been used for other prisoners of war, but this is all part of the psychological counseling that they will have, and they will get the tools needed to deal with the incredible stress, the trauma that they've been under over the next several years. So we understand it's been a very emotional reunion, as you just saw in that video, several family members walking up to these Americans with small American flags, embracing them here on this tarmac here at this Army base. And again, this will be a very long process as they recover, not just physically. We understand they are in good health, physically at least, but it'll be the mental scars that they'll have to deal with for months and years to come, Gary.
I'm sure airline food never tasted quite so good. Gabe, what about kind of on the macro part of this, right? I mean, this is a prisoner exchange. This is a big deal for these families, but it's also meant to change relations to some degree between the U.S. and Iran. Is the American relationship with Tehran any better this week than it was last week? Like, where does this fit in that part of the puzzle?
Well, Garrett, there are a lot of questions about whether this will lead to any thaw in relations at this point. You know, some analysts have been saying that it could be a first step, but at the same time, the U.S. and U.S. administration officials say that there are no plans to have any direct talks with Iran at this point. They're leaving the door open to diplomacy. But just today at the UN General Assembly, President Biden made it a point to say that Iran must not have a nuclear weapon. So at this point, things seem to be up in the air when it comes to relations between the U.S. and Iran, but there doesn't appear to be any direct engagement with the Americans and Iran. And just yesterday, the U.S. announced new sanctions against the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence and former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad because the U.S. is still asking for information regarding the presumed death of a former FBI agent, Bob Levinson, who disappeared in 2007 on an island off the coast of Iran. The U.S. still has not accounted for how he died. Iran still has not even acknowledged that arrest. So the U.S. is urging Americans not to travel to Iran, and they are urging answers. They're demanding answers when it comes to the death of that American and any others who have been wrongfully detained, Garrett.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you for that reporting. And still to come, on the rise again, the number of illegal migrant crossings at the southern border is going back up, threatening to aggravate an already intense migrant crisis in some of America's largest cities. We have the latest on that story and the fallout next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The number of illegal crossings at the southern border are on the rise this month. Two Department of Homeland Security officials tell NBC News that not only have border officers steadily encountered more migrants over the course of September, but agents apprehended more than 7,500 migrants on Sunday alone. That's a drastic increase from the last official border numbers released back in July, where apprehensions averaged around 4,300 a day. The number of encounters dropped off in May after the Biden administration lifted the pandemic-era border policy known as Title 42 and replaced it with new policies aimed at making it harder for migrants to seek asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border and encouraging lawful entry applications filed from migrants' home countries. The new rise in encounters could overload a system that's already stretched beyond its capacity. And a new legal filing in L.A. revealed that migrant parents and children were temporarily separated in Texas border facilities this summer due to overcrowding. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins me now with more on her new reporting. So, Julia, what are we learning here about this, and why do officials think it's happening now?
Well, typically the numbers do go up in the fall. Those really high temperatures that you see in Arizona and Texas start to come down a bit, and so you will see an increase. But this increase is a little more drastic than even they had expected. And another thing that really worries them is the number of children coming with their parents and children coming alone. They think this is because of pent-up tension, frustration, where people are having a hard time entering legally. They're being told by smugglers, take matters into your own hands, cross the border. And they're even seeing places like in Arizona where migrants have learned, or at least cartels have learned, how to cut holes in border fencing to come through. Basically, this is a real test of these border policies, whether it be Trump's wall or Biden's asylum policies. Will they hold? Because they've really tried a lot here, but now the system's being tested.
There were predictions of doom when Title 42 was removed and these new policies were put in place. They seem to have been very effective for a while. Did something change about how the policies are being enforced or how they're being understood in the countries these folks are coming from? Like, I'm trying to figure out what changed on the policy front here.
Well, really, they're able to look at migrants, whether they be relatives or friends or anyone they talk to through word of mouth, who have been able to come in. They're looking at the 60,000 migrants who are in New York City right now with the right to shelter. They're looking at people who have been success stories. And that often happens after a policy that might seem like it's going to be 100%, no one comes in, these are the rules of zero tolerance. Instead, they are able to see that some people are able to come in, they get processed, they get released, they get the ability to wait for their court date. And so other people start thinking, maybe my chances are better than I previously thought.
And we only have about 30 seconds left, but tell me about these family separations that you found happening.
Yeah, this is from a court monitor who interviewed families in a Donna, Texas detention facility this summer and found that in some cases they were separating children even as young as 8 from their parents. Now, CBP says they did this because of safety due to overcrowding. They didn't have enough room in those family pods. And it's important to point out this is not like what the Trump administration did. They were separated for a few days and then brought back together. Not like Trump, where they were separated with no way of getting back in touch. But the court monitor did point out that when they were separated, the mothers and the children had no way to communicate or talk to each other.
It's good stuff. Good reporting here, Julia. Thank you for staying on top of this story for us. And thank you for being with us this hour. I'm back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. NBC News Now coverage continues with Yasmin Vasugian in for Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.